Formula One rarely stands still, and sometimes it's the quiet rumors that trigger the biggest earthquakes. After his departure from Red Bull, Christian Horner has barely disappeared before the scene already speculates about his spectacular comeback. This time, though, not in Milton Keynes, but just a few kilometers away, in Silverstone at Aston Martin. And by his side, none other than Max Verstappen. What on the surface sounds like pure fantasy has found a powerful supporter. Former Grand Prix winner Riccardo Patrese. He's considered a close friend of Horner, and in an interview, he's formulated a theory that currently electrifies the entire paddock. It reminds me of Michael Schumacher when he left Benetton to build a new empire with Ferrari. Patrese said, Christian could do the same. A new Red Bull, only with green paint. The parallel is much more than just a PR stunt. Schumacher took the best engineers from Benetton to Ferrari back then. Ross Brawn, Rory Byrne, Nigel Stepney. Together they built a team that dominated the sport for years. According to Patrese, Horner could follow a similar path should he join Aston Martin and convince Verstappen to come along. Formula One is facing a major regulatory reform starting in 2026. New engines, new chassis, new opportunities. Exactly the kind of upheaval in which power shifts emerge. Horner, who after 2 decades and 14 titles at Red Bull was removed in the summer of 2025, has received, according to reports, a severance package of around $100 million. The agreement is said to allow him to return to the paddock as early as next year. Officially, the 51-year-old is currently focusing on family, but behind the scenes much suggests that conversations are taking place, at least informally. Aston Martin would be the logical step. The team possesses in Lawrence Stroll an ambitious owner, in Andy Cowell a new CEO, and in Fernando Alonso, a champion whose career is approaching its end. But what's missing is a charismatic leadership personality with winning DNA. Horner could fill exactly this gap. And then there's Max Verstappen, 4-time world champion, sportingly at a level rarely challenged anymore, but increasingly dissatisfied with the direction Red Bull is heading. Since the internal crisis between Horner, Jos Verstappen, and parts of management, the relationship is considered strained. The father, once the loudest supporter, has now become one of the most critical voices in the background. Patrese believes that time could heal the wounds. Maybe Jos Verstappen and Christian Horner will be friends again in 2 or 3 years, he said. If Christian has the chance to form a new team that can fight for titles, and Max has that chance, Jos would step aside. The idea sounds bold, but it fits the current dynamic. Red Bull will compete in 2026 with its own engine development in collaboration with Ford. A risky venture considered a technical minefield even within the team. Should the project fail, Verstappen could feel forced to explore new options. Horner, who was always considered his biggest supporter, would then be the natural key figure to make a switch attractive. But Aston Martin would need to offer more than just a big budget. To win, Verstappen requires sporting perspective and an environment free from political chaos. After recent restructurings, the factory rebuild, and the hiring of numerous ex-Mercedes engineers, it seems this is now becoming reality. Horner could complete this transition. His ability to form a team around a clear leadership structure is undisputed. It was he who transformed Red Bull from nothing into a dynasty, and who recognized, promoted, and protected Verstappen as a young driver. Should this connection be revived, it would be not just a sporting comeback, but a symbolic revenge. The architect who puts his own empire in the shade. No one is seriously denying anything yet. Aston Martin stays silent, Red Bull remains in wait-and-see mode, and Verstappen himself remains unimpressed, at least publicly. But in the paddock, people know. In Formula One, the biggest revolutions never start at the microphone, but at private dinners and discreet phone calls. And that's exactly where quiet movements are said to be happening. If the speculation about Christian Horner and Max Verstappen proved true, Formula One would face a tectonic shift. Because what's being hinted at here is far more than a transfer rumor. It would be a silent revolution that could turn the power structure of the entire sport on its head. Red Bull, long synonymous with dominance, speed, and control, would suddenly lose its 2 most defining figures, the strategist and the driver. Horner is not just a team principal, he's an architect. He built Red Bull from a marketing project into a world champion team that shaped generations. And Verstappen? He is the product and the crown jewel of this system. Together, they define the era after Hamilton. If both leave the ship, Red Bull loses not just leadership, but identity. Within the scene, Aston Martin has long been considered the sleeping giant. Lawrence Stroll has invested billions, built an ultra-modern factory, poached hundreds of engineers from top teams, and yet the project lacks a central thread. Andy Cowell brings technical vision, but what's missing is sporting soul. Horner could provide exactly that: structure, discipline, and winning mentality. He would know how to bond a team emotionally, something money alone never achieves. But the real question of power concerns Max Verstappen. Would he really leave Red Bull to build a new project? On the surface, it sounds absurd. Why give up safe ground? Yet in Formula One, safety often equals stagnation. Verstappen knows that the 2026 season could change everything. The new regulations will reshuffle the deck. Engines, aerodynamics, energy efficiency. Everything goes back to zero. And that's exactly where the temptation lies. If Red Bull failed with the in-house Ford engine, the four-time world champion could find himself in a dead end. Aston Martin, meanwhile, will compete with Honda, the same manufacturer with which Verstappen won 3 of his world titles. The connection is there, the trust too. And if Horner actually took on sporting leadership, Verstappen would have not just continuity, but control. Riccardo Patrese spoke of a new Red Bull, but in reality it would be a fresh start with familiar faces. Horner, Verstappen, Honda, an alliance that once dominated the sport. Only this time with British precision and green paint. It would be a fusion of old strength and new energy, of stability and risk. For Red Bull, however, it would be a shock hard to absorb. Without Horner, the emotional anchor is missing. Without Verstappen, the sporting focal point. Helmut Marko, the old mentor of the system, is anyway nearing retirement, and his successor, Oliver Mintzlaff, pursues a more pragmatic economic strategy. Should the core of the team actually fall apart, Red Bull faces the fate that once befell Ferrari. Too big, too complex, too self-satisfied. Politically, a Horner-Verstappen switch to Aston Martin would be a signal. Power is shifting. The old dynasties are crumbling, and the future belongs to those brave enough to redefine it. For Honda, it would be the perfect return, away from the image of supplier toward the architect of a new success story. And for Lawrence Stroll, it would be the crown jewel of his vision, transforming the ridiculed private team into an empire that moves on equal footing with Mercedes and Red Bull. But as tempting as the scenario sounds, the risks are enormous. Horner would not only need to rebuild Aston Martin's sporting structure, but also maintain political balance. Because with Stroll Sr. and Jr. in key roles, the team is anything but a quiet workplace. Verstappen's integration would also generate tensions, not just internally, but across the entire paddock. A transfer of this magnitude creates waves. And that's exactly what makes the idea so fascinating. Because behind all this lies a symbolic question. Who controls the future of Formula One? The established giants, or those brave enough to risk their power? Horner was always a strategist who recognized the moment before it came. And maybe now he recognizes that the time is right to write a new chapter. Not as part of Red Bull, but as the founder of a new empire. Patrase's words may be speculative, but they capture a truth. If Horner and Verstappen stood side by side again, it wouldn't be a nostalgic look back. It would be a challenge. To Red Bull, to Mercedes, to the past. In Formula One, dynasties never last forever. And sometimes the end of an era doesn't begin with a bang, but with a phone call between two men who know they've already changed the world together once.